Hey again, everybody. Welcome back to Dare Ballpark. I'm Brad Eaton, your host here on the Dirt Podcast, joined once again by my co-host Andrew Hayes.
How's it going?
Hey, we're up in the suites here at the ballpark, and today we are joined by Dragons pitcher Jayvien Sandridge. Jayvien, thanks for joining us.
Yes, sir. Glad to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're absolutely glad you're here, man. So we're getting close to the end of the season here. Before we kind of dive back into your history, which is an interesting story, tell us a little bit about how this season's been going for you as we get into the dog days and what hopefully is a playoff hunt here over the next few weeks.
For sure. Yeah, it's been a pretty good season for myself. As a team, we have a really good group of guys here, and we're playing well. We're just trying to finish strong here and make a push for the playoffs and to try to win a championship. Personally, I'm proud of what I've gone through this season. I, like most pitchers, have gone through some ups and some downs, and I'm just grateful to continue to get better every time that I step out there and every time I have an opportunity to get on the mound.
What do you think your biggest improvement from start to where we're at now in the season's been so far, just in like pitching repertoire?
I think it would be confidence in my stuff. You talk about repertoire. Like I picked up a new pitch in the beginning of the season. I started throwing a changeup, and I'm definitely confident in where I am with that right now. My fastball has always been my dominant pitch. I have a slider that I've been throwing since I was 12. So those two pitches I'm confident in, but to know that I have a third pitch under my belt that is effective to right-handed hitters, and that just makes me even more confident.
So when you start throwing a changeup, who makes the recommendation? Is that something you wanted to pick up, or is it a coaching staff decision where they're like, man, we need one more in this tool belt here, or what is it?
Yeah, so I was actually throwing fork ball / splitter last season for my third pitch.
Okay.
And it was effective. I got a lot of swings and misses, and it was a good pitch for me to use in 2 strikes. But I came to spring training, and I worked on that pitch a lot this offseason, but I came to spring training, and it just wasn't where it needed to be. Mostly I wasn't getting it into the zone as much as I should have. So, pitching coaches, coordinators, they both told me that it would be a good idea for me to try to throw a changeup, just because it's a little bit easier to get into the zone. So, I trusted the group of guys we got, and I started working on it, working my grips a little bit, and the rest was history. Now it's just about making it better every time I use it.
Throwing the same pitches and doing the same thing for your whole life, though, I mean, getting you to where you're at, playing, minor league baseball and being drafted by, MLB teams and things like that. How quickly are you able to pick up something like that? Because I'm assuming you're like in the zone and you've been throwing the same 2-3 pitches for your whole life. Was it like days, weeks, months? How long do you have to work on that?
Honestly, I'm still working on it. Like I know I sounded pretty confident, but like it's really important to know that your pitches are always adapting and you're always trying to make adjustments. So when it comes to the changeup, just being able to throw it in the zone is a positive, and then once I start getting the movement on it is a positive. Like as long as it's consistent and it's effective, then we keep using it. That's really the main thing when it comes to developing pitches, is just continuing to work on them and make sure that they're effective the way that you need them to be.
Pitchers talk a lot about having their stuff, right? Or you'll hear a manager or a coach be like, oh, he's got his stuff tonight. You talked about ups and downs. I'm assuming on those nights where maybe you're having a down, you'd probably say, hey, I don't feel like I have my stuff, or I don't feel like I have this pitch. Like for the non-professional baseball players in the room, right? What does that feel like? How do you know? Is it just like, hey, the muscle feels different? Like, what does that feel like? Can you describe that?
That's a great question. Honestly, I think that when it comes to the feel thing, it's tricky because there's a lot of guys that'll say that when I feel good, I usually don't pitch as good as when I don't feel good. Because it's funny. I was just talking to our mental performance coach about this, and sometimes you kind of give yourself higher expectations when you feel good. When you got that good feel of the slider, you got that good feel of the changeup, it's like, oh, this is gonna go really well. But then sometimes when you're not feeling good, you almost give yourself an excuse in the back of your mind. It's like, I don't got my stuff, so I can just go out there and
no pressure, right?
Exactly. So just trying to be consistent whenever you go out there with no matter what you have. I know that my top tier stuff and my bottom tier stuff can get guys out. As long as I throw it in the zone, as long as I'm, making my pitches effective and making the hitters believe that I always got my good stuff. That's something that's really underestimated, is your presence out there, the way that you look at hitters, the way that you read their facial expressions. Little things like that can definitely make a big difference when you don't have all your stuff.
You get this like bright smiley face right now. You're like just mean on the mound, right?
Oh yeah. I've gone through some phases this season where like I was like, all right, let's try some mad dog. Let's try mean dog them, and then there were some times where it's like, okay, let's back off a little bit. Let's just relax and try to get into the zone. You know,
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is tick off the 300-pound first baseman from the other team.
Exactly.
It's 400 feet on you, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So on those nights, right? Like, are you making adjustments? Or are you just like you take the pressure off and keep going with it? Like, how does that work from a physical standpoint?
From the physical standpoint, I think that it's just about having cues. For me, it's like I like to think of it as I have this big chest of information that coaches and from just all the studying that I've done, the videos that like I can just pull things out of, right? Like if I have a good feeling that day, all right, I'm gonna use this cue that's creating that good feeling. Mm-hmm. Now let's say I miss with a couple pitches back to back, all right, let's go back to that feeling. So really it's just about having something that you can go to whenever you get in trouble.
Yeah.
You mentioned mental performance coach a minute ago too. How important is someone like that versus a physical performance coach? Like where's the balance on those type of things?
I would say they're pretty equal. You know, I think it is really important as a professional athlete to focus on the mental game, especially at this level when the physical aspects aren't that separating from everyone. Yeah. You know, so it really, and I'm sure that a lot of people have heard this because from the time I was in Little League, you know, they told me the guys in the big leagues, the only difference is their mental, right? The only thing the difference is they can do it every single day. They can have the right mindset to continue to do it every day. So I think that, you know, I love my strength coach. So just put that out there. I give him a lot of credit as well. But definitely the mental side is really important for sure.
So on days where like things aren't going your way and you're going out there and you're having, you know, these bad outings and like you said, in baseball, I think you get more time to stew on things, especially in the pitching side of things, because you're not going back out there an inning later, a day later, right? It can be days in between your pitching. How do you shake off the rough outings and not let them affect the next time you're going on the mound?
Well, I would say that, you know, in moments when I know I had a rough night or I had, you know, things didn't go the way I wanted them to, first of all, I always give glory to God, because regardless of why I was out there or, you know, what happened while I was out there, I know that I was blessed and that somebody in the stands, the fans that came to watch me, somebody enjoyed that experience and somebody got something from that experience, and especially the kids. And I know, you know, there's a lot of fans out here that support me. And no matter how I pitch, I'm going to give thanks to God, because I know that it's a blessing just to be out there playing in front of them, you know?
So we've talked a lot about this year, right, and the stories and the mental things, but your history in professional baseball has been a bit of a mental up and down kind of thing too. So, you know, to set the table, you are playing high school ball, and then you had a year of college under your belt before you got drafted the first time?
No,
didn't even have that much, right?
Yeah, I was drafted out of high school.
Okay.
From Mercersburg Academy by the Orioles.
Sounds like a college.
Yes, it does. It was very college-esque. It's a very nice high school, and you know they.
So unlike the public schools that Hayes went to, right?
You know, I actually went to 3 different high schools. Wow. Yeah, my dad got a coaching job at Mercersburg Academy. Okay. And so that was what helped me get into that very nice school, and I'm grateful for the experience that I had there, because I learned a lot. You know, like you said, it was like a college. Yeah. My senior year I was boarding, as a boarding student. Okay. Like it was like I was a freshman in college my senior year of high school. Yeah. And so that kind of gave me a step ahead. I matured a little bit quicker. But then, you know, the draft process, I mean, it was just me and my dad. I didn't have an agent. So we didn't completely understand the process, the business of baseball. It was like my dream since I was 12 was to be drafted out of high school. Like I knew it was possible. So that's what we wanted to make it happen. And, you know, the Orioles came probably 2 weeks before the draft and told me that they were interested. So, you know, I was definitely excited whenever I found out that, you know, Baltimore, my hometown team, wanted me. And so, you know, the 32nd round comes, I get drafted. Probably one of the biggest moments of my life. And then one of the biggest moments, but I get drafted. I play 2 years of rookie ball. Then COVID happens and they release 44 people the same day that I was released, and that was a tough time for sure in itself. And you know that time in itself is something that I am grateful for and know that shaped me to be who I am today. But after that process of being released and finding out that I could go to school, I went to Lynn University, which is a D2 in Boca Raton, Florida, and I pitched 7 innings because I didn't get cleared by the NCAA as an amateur until halfway through that college season. So once that season went through and I found out, I mean, I shouldn't say found out, I was throwing the ball really good in college. I got a velocity gain. You know, I started throwing a little bit harder, and that piqued a lot of scouts' interest. So by that time, you know, I knew that somebody was going to pick me up, and the Reds, they jumped on board first, and that's where we ended up now. So now the rest of that was, you know, history.
There's a lot to unpack here, right?
Yes,
like,
I was going through it.
No, I mean, having lived it, I'm sure, right? But it's like, so let's go back to like that draft day, right? I mean, you mentioned it a couple of times. It's the hometown team, right? You're a Maryland kid. The Baltimore Orioles come calling in the 32nd round. It's like, but did you think about not going pro and doing it? Because it's 32nd round, right? Like, I've never been drafted, so it's a hell of a lot better than me, right? But there are people, once you get to those ages, like that seems to be the area where you're like, okay, I got to make a decision. Do I want to go to college or do I want to go into the pros? What made you decide to go pro at that point versus taking the college route?
Well, that's funny you ask, because me and my dad, that day, the first 2 days of the draft go by, and we had actually had some conversations with the Orioles up until before the draft, and
it wasn't a total surprise when they called.
And there was a few other teams that were interested. So the first 2 days, you know, we were expecting somebody to call me, and you know, we had set a number at because you know I was committed to Central Florida, so it wasn't, you know, I had some leverage under my belt that like I would go play this big time school and gain some velocity, get some some interest from other teams. Yeah. So that was always a possibility to go to school. But in my mind, I had always dreamed. I mean, like I said, since I was 12 years old, my goal was to get drafted at high school, and I have bigger aspirations, you know, to be the greatest pitcher in the world, to win a Cy Young award. But at that time, being drafted at a high school was all I wanted. And I say that because there were a lot of people that didn't believe I could. And truthfully, that was a motivating factor for me. Was like, okay, you don't think I can do that? You don't think that I can do that because of who I am, because of where I'm from? Well, I'm going to show you the difference. And you know, me and my dad, we looked at each other on the second day of that draft and was like, well, being drafted out of high school is pretty dang cool, man. And we looked at each other and was like, he said to me, you know, if you're willing to do what they're asking, then let's do it. And from there, I decided to be professional. Called the Orioles, said let's do it, and they drafted me the next day.
Would there have been any difference if it wasn't the hometown team? Like, is there any soft spot for them versus, like, say the Blue Jays call or the Pirates call or someone like that?
I don't want to go to Canada.
Yeah. Well,
Honestly, I think that definitely made a difference. Like, it was such. It
was emotional, right?
Yes, yeah. I was so emotional to know that the Orioles were interested in me and that I would have my whole family in the area once I made it to the big leagues. Like there was definitely a lot that came with the Orioles name, you know.
Yeah, you were picturing a few years down the road, right?
Yes, for sure.
Growing up with an Orioles hat on, you probably got pictures of you as a kid in Orioles gear.
I've been I was at Camden Yards so many times. It was just like it felt surreal in the moment to know that the Orioles were interested, you know.
Yeah, but like most dreams, unfortunately, they don't always turn out the way we want, right? So we talk about COVID, and it was like, and you kind of went through that quickly. It's like there were multiple things happening. I mean, there was the COVID pandemic, there was the shutdown of baseball for the year, but amongst that too, that was also kind of when Major League Baseball sort of started taking over minor leagues and wildly decreasing the number of teams and thus players, right? Which sounds like that's where you got caught up in that.
For sure.
So as good as it maybe feels to have like, hey, I'm not the only guy that they cut, right? It's still like that's still got to be a blow. So like, take us through that day mentally, right? Like, you made this decision, emotional as it might have been a couple years earlier, and all of a sudden it feels like that door's closing. Yes. Like, how much did it feel, okay, that door's closing, I got to find another one, versus like, that door's closing, that chapter's closed, that book is closed, right? Like, where were you at mentally, and how did you get through those next days and weeks?
Well, I think that's a great way to describe it. You know, it was like, in that moment, it felt like the book was closed. It felt like the book was thrown out the window, to be honest with you. Because me and my dad were headed to the facility to work like we did every day of the off season, and I was at the peak of my physical strength and throwing hard, and I felt really good. And then I get that call, and it's safe to say we didn't go into the facility that day. We left. That was a tough day. I actually found out the next day about the possibility of going to school. But in that moment, for me, it was like everything was just so heavy that it was difficult for me to process that, because in my mind, it's like, I just, like you said, I just skipped this process of going to school on purpose. And now you're telling me I got to take a step backwards. At least that's what it felt to me. Like, to me, it was like, I got to take this step backwards to go back to school and do this whole process again. And yeah, and I think that, that formed me to be where I am now, where I kind of let go of some things. I let go of some expectations of myself. I let go of the pressure that I had to like feel like I needed to do certain things to be a big leaguer. It was like, okay, you just lifted this weight off of me, that where I thought that, being a professional ball player was the only thing in the world. Because coming out of high school, that's what it was. It was like this. There's nothing else in my existence but the Baltimore Orioles, And once they took that from me, I definitely felt stripped. But in that moment, I leaned on God, and that's why I told you guys that is my base, my foundation. Because in those moments when I was broken down and I was tired and I was hurting, I prayed for God. I prayed that my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ guide me, because in those moments when you feel lost, if it's difficult to find somebody to motivate you to where to go. It's like, where do I go? What do I do from here? What you were saying. And I truly believe that God opened doors, closed doors, motivated people around me to tell me what to do. Because a lot of people told me, hey, you should go to school. And I'm like, no, I don't know. I don't know about that. You should probably go to school. Like, it was just continuous. And I'm like, okay.
Took a few times to hear that message before it soaked in, huh?
Right. And
that's how it works from God, right?
Exactly.
Like, you don't follow it the first time.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like,
no,
I keep hearing this. Maybe there's something
times,
to it.
Exactly.
We're all a little thick-headed when it comes to that.
So who was the ultimate person that introduced the opportunity or the possibility of you going back to school? Because, like, I work for a minor league baseball team. You work for a minor league baseball team. I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know you could go back to college after playing in the minors before. Who was like, you do know this is an option, right?
So there was a scout in the Orioles organization that had ties to Lynn University, and he put me in contact with the coach there, Coach Garbelosa.
Okay.
And when our first conversation, he told me that there were 3 other players at the school already who had played professional baseball. And there were a few other schools that, like, because from as far as I knew in the beginning, it was just D2. I had to go to a D2 or D3, and that was what I was told. So I reached out to a few schools to see if they had heard, about this process, and nobody understood it. But then I talked to Coach Garbelosa, and he's like, "Hey, man, I'll handle this. You come here. You tell me you want to come to school here. The rest of it will be handled." And I put my faith in him. I believe that. Okay, I can go play baseball, possibly. There was a he told me that it was possible that I might have to sit out a year because of the NCAA restrictions, but it worked. It worked out for the best, and I went there, practiced with the team. I wasn't able to go to the games because of COVID and et cetera. But once I found out that it was a possibility, I jumped on board, because at that point it's like, all right, I'm gonna. Let's say I don't play baseball. I got to get my degree.
Right.
I got to do something to be successful and provide. Because for me, I got a big family. I got 3 little sisters. I got uncles, grandparents that all live in the same area as me. So from a young age, it was like, I'm going to support everybody here. I got family in Charlottesville that are living in the slums. Like, I'm going to take care of everybody. And so I knew, even if I didn't make it with the Orioles, I'm going to make money, and I'm going to do what I got to do to take care of my family. So once that opportunity came, it was like, all right, let's go.
Was there a little bit of like maybe a benefit to coming up and seeing a bunch of drafted players and playing in the minor leagues and then going back and playing in college and being like, I've seen way tougher than this before? So like, it preps you, it hardens you a little bit, and you're like, all right, this is not as intimidating as it probably would have been if you would have just came out of high school.
Right. Yeah. I think that there was a little bit of that mindset when I first got to Lynn. I did only play in rookie ball in Orioles, so like. Yeah. I did see some high level guys that came through. They just were never there very long,
Right.
So that's a good point. When I got to school, there was definitely this mindset of like, oh, I can dominate these guys. But it's funny, my first outing in college was against Tampa, and they hit the crap out of me, man.
Little humble pie real fast.
They scored 3 on me, and that went in, and I was like, okay, all right, let's humble myself a little bit. Let's get back to work and hone in on my stuff,
You mentioned a couple times too during this conversation, your velocity increase on fastball, and like I know fastball is obviously, I think your bread and butter in terms of your pitching repertoire. When you're increasing your velocity on your fastball, like at the point where you're probably getting to the point where you're peaking, physically and that kind of stuff, is it more like lifting and getting stronger? Or is it more technique where you're tweaking this just enough that you're getting another mile or 2 mile per hour out of fastball?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I would say, I didn't completely understand the strength aspect of it up until I got with the Reds. So, I was lifting in high school a little bit, but, understanding what I needed to really be doing to incorporate the movement patterns to be strong down the mound and be fluid was really important. But definitely just the tweaks of continuous repetition. I actually, when I went to Lynn during the fall, my velo was around the same as it was when I was with the Orioles. I was, at 89, 90. And then going into that spring, it was, okay, I'm going to start long tossing. I'm going to start getting off the mound more often, doing some dry work to just feel myself going down the mound. And it really is what you said. It's just a continuous pattern of trying to tweak little things and put more information in that chest that I was talking about, and that I can just keep on pulling out. Because even today, there are things that I learned a year and a half ago that I didn't use that I'm using now.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really important, is to just soak in as much information as possible, because you never know when you're going to need to use it.
Yeah. Do you see big differences in pitching coaches from level to level or from team to team? There's got to be a little bit of that trust too, where it's this is what I've done for my whole life that's gotten me to this point. And then when someone comes in and says, all right, but you need to change this little thing, there's got to be a little voice in the back of your mind that's I just met you a week ago. I've been doing this for the past 10 years.
Yeah. I would say when I was drafted out of high school, that was something that I needed to understand a little bit better, because, I'm fresh out of high school and I'm like, these guys know everything. They know exactly what I need to be better. And in some aspect they do. They have been around the block. They've seen countless number of guys come through and be better and get worse. Yeah. So for me, I trusted those guys, and it wasn't that they gave me bad information, but it was, like you said, I gave all of myself to them, where now I know that I can't do that, because if I continue to take every tip that each pitching coach gives me, I lose myself.
Right.
I lose myself. I lose what makes me successful. So that's definitely really important. For kids that are young, listen to your pitching coaches, of course, but know yourself. And what's really important is watching video, breaking down video. Anytime that I pitch, anytime I get on the mound, I watch it. I break it down. And even when it's a bad outing, now there are some aspects to that you don't want to watch too much times that you're doing bad, because then you get out there and you're going to picture that in your head.
Yeah.
So for me, something that I do that I find really important, I break down every one of my strikeouts. Every time I strike somebody out, I clip that video, I put it in a montage. Because now, when I'm out there, that's what's playing in my head.
That's what you want to replicate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I got 70, 80 strikeouts just playing in my head that I can go back to in those moments when I got bases loaded, or I just gave up a home run. I know that, okay, I can still do this.
Yeah.
You talk about knowing who you are as a player, right? Did that whole process from getting released from the Orioles organization, going to Lynn, is that kind of where, do you feel like that's where you found yourself? It sort of
Absolutely.
Seems like that's where you're heading in the story, right?
Absolutely, man. I mean, Coach Garbs, he could tell you. When I got to Lynn, it wasn't all, rainbows and butterflies, man. I was in
You're probably pretty messed up mentally when you got there, right?
I was messed up, man. I was messed up, and then
most people would be.
And I talk about that velo jump and that constant work ethic. I found out my son was going to be born. That January was when I found out, and it was okay, what you going to do now? Who are you going to be now? How are you going to provide for your family? Even though that was already part of my life, I wanted to take care of my family, but now it's real. Now you got a life to take care of, and it was okay, what do you have to do to be successful? I got to focus on my routine. I got to focus on my rhythm, my rhythm of life, knowing how to handle conversations with people, and knowing how to adapt in situations where you're not comfortable. That's what I learned in that process of being released and going to school, and just trusting myself, man. There was so much doubt that came out of being released. What did I do? What did I do? Because to me, in my mind, I was striving. I might have not had the greatest season as a 19, 20-year-old kid, but I was still doing well, and just started throwing a little bit harder. So I was what did I do? And that was the revelation when I got to school, was like, man, you're still good enough. You as a person, as a man, as a baseball player, you're still good enough, and just continue to try to get better. And that's what I pray about every time I step on that field now. It's like, I just want to get better today than I was yesterday.
Is that when the doubt turned into relief for you?
Yes, I would say so. There was definitely some stress taken off of my shoulders whenever I found out like who I can be, and I think that the velocity, like that plays into the confidence aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But truthfully, knowing that like I am capable of playing at the highest level, regardless of if scouts and coaches and owners think that or not, like that relief of knowing I believe in myself. Because when you get released and you go through that process of feeling as low as you've ever been, like you lose a part of you lose some of that pride, like, right? You lose a little bit of yourself, where it's like, okay, what can I lose, man? Right. What can I lose? I got a son on the way. I'm gonna take care of him. I got a blessed family at home. Everything is taken care of. All I gotta do is go out here and pitch. Like that's the fun part,
Do you feel like do you feel, and I think I probably know the answer, right? Do you feel like you would be the pitcher you were today if you hadn't gone through that?
Absolutely not. No. I mean, I think that like aspects of the physical aspects would be similar,
Sure.
Because there's such a good support system in professional baseball that I think that I would have gotten to the point physically, and maybe even like my pitch shaping, et cetera, might have been something similar. But there's nothing that can compare to the process I went through to be released, to go to school, for the mental aspect. Like I give a lot of the credit to God. I give all the credit to God, because if I don't go through those times, if I don't go through that low, I don't know how good that this can feel. Yeah. I don't know how good it is to be here in Dayton with thousands of people screaming for me, because out of high school, it's like, oh, this is what I deserved. Like this is where I should be, and realistically, I didn't understand that there is a much lower spot that you can be to. There is a much darker space than being here and playing and being blessed to play a baseball game.
Yeah, it puts the micro lows that you could have here in perspective.
Yes, absolutely.
Where it's like, yeah, you have a bad inning. That's
like, okay.
nothing. I've been through 1,000 times worse than this. I've came out on top. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's so. Because of everything you've been through, right? You're probably a couple years older, I think, than a lot of the guys on our roster. Got a wife, got a son at home. He's turning 2 in a couple weeks here, you said?
Turning 2 in a couple weeks.
Which is awesome. So it seems like your story is really inspirational. Do you find yourself like sharing that with other guys? I mean, have you become that kind of guy, or is it more like, hey, if you need me, come to me, right? Like how do you try to go out and tell that story? Because I mean, it's super interesting. I'm just curious, like, how you help other people, or do you help other people?
I would say, I don't like go out my way to tell people my story, right? Like when I was first signed, there was definitely a lot of questions about it, because like you guys, like nobody knows how I was able to do that. Like a lot of people have never heard of that process.
I'm sure the NCAA didn't make it easy.
No, they did not.
They're not notorious for making anything easy.
Right. So
we're glad it got through, though.
Exactly. It was just like such a blessed opportunity that it's like I have to share my story so that other people, like, the way I think of it is like I'm shining the light on people. Like, okay, I have multiple teammates that were released with the Orioles, and I told them my story, and they're like, what? Mm-hmm. I can go back to school? And I had a couple teammates that did that are like, okay, I'm gonna go back and play. And maybe they didn't work out the same way, but at least they had that time to like, I'm gonna go get a year of my degree. I'm gonna go play a year of baseball. It's just sharing your story. And the way I think of it, like I said, I'm shining the light, but truthfully, I think that like the Holy Spirit is shining through me right now as I'm speaking to you, but he's also shining through the last 2 years of my life, that like if I share it with you, you're like, wow, God is so good. And that's where I get joy out of, where I tell my teammates and they're shocked, because it's like, okay, I just made somebody's day. I just made somebody believe a little bit more than they might have,
Yeah.
And then when you talk about, helping teammates, guys that get released, I find it, like, I know it's really important for me to reach out, because I've been in that situation, because I know how that feels. Yeah. And I know, like, on that day, like, I love it when I'm able to, like, when somebody is released and I'm able to be there for them, give them a hug, dap them up, like, because I know how it felt. Like, that's all I wanted. Yeah. That's all I wanted, was like somebody to be there and be like, you're gonna be okay.
Feel like you weren't alone in that situation, right?
Exactly. And I have a huge support system. My dad was there with me, But I just think that if I was in the circumstances here where it's like you're in the season, that's a completely different feeling where you're in the season and you get released and it's like, okay, now where do I go? Well, hey, you still got options. Maybe you can't go back to school, but you can still find another route to get back into pro ball and reach your dreams. Because not for everybody, but for a lot of us, we all want to make it to the big leagues. Sure. And we all have high aspirations of playing at the highest level and being the best at the highest level. So being released shouldn't stop that. Like if you truly believe in your abilities and where you want to be, sometimes you might just have a bad season and they don't believe in you, but somebody will. Somebody will believe in you if you just continue to do what you're supposed to do and continue to trust in yourself. And it's really hard to when you get released. So I like to be there for people that, need me in that moment.
Have you thought about how your story, or how you're going to tell your story to your boy as it gets a little older?
Man, I think he's like part of it. I think that he is my story. Like, because if he's not born, if those nine months where I'm like, man, what am I gonna do? Like, if that doesn't happen, then like I'm not here.
And then they're born, and you're like, now what am I gonna do?
Exactly. and it's crazy that time, man. We didn't discuss it too much, but I tore my meniscus. Right when I was signed by the I was signed by the Reds.
That was before he was born.
Yeah, I pitched 7 innings. Somewhere around 7 innings for the Reds in rookie ball, and then tore my meniscus pushing off the mound. Tore my back meniscus. Pitched like 3 games because I'm just like I'm going to fight through the pain. I just got this opportunity. I'm trying to make it to the big leagues this year. So I just had a lot of pressure on myself that like I wanted to do it. And I go get the surgery, and then he's born the next week. So when I go home, I'm in my cast, not cast, but I have my brace on.
Brace, yeah.
Yeah, and just like that process in itself was kind of surreal. I went home for 2 weeks and then came back, and then went back home and was just like, it was like, okay, I know I was going to be a dad, but this whole revelation of like, oh man, I just tore my meniscus. Now what is going to happen? Like there was just so many things that were up in the air at that time, and that is when you learn to just let things go. And in those moments, you have to rely on God. Like if you don't, you're going to be so lost in everything that's going on, and it's just going to make it so much more difficult for you.
Well, Jayvien, hey, thanks for spending some time with us today. It was great to get to know you and your backstory. It was awesome, and this is usually where we tell somebody like, hey, best of luck with the rest of the season. I hope everything works out. But I have a feeling, given your history, regardless of what happens, man, you're going to be all right.
Yes, sir.
And you're going to be great.
Absolutely.
So it's inspirational. It's fun to listen to. But again, we wish you nothing but the best for the rest of the year and the rest of your career. Hope it's a long one.
I appreciate that very much. It's been great to be here with you guys.